Lori Peston. I'm president of the Republican Women of Cherokee County, and we are doing well here in Cherokee County, and the idea tonight is to bring you some information about the candidates who are running for State District 14, State Senate District 14. Yesterday we had a surprise announcement from the Matt Lockridge campaign, and they told us that he would not be here this evening. We tried to get the message out to as many people as possible, and if we didn't reach you, I apologize for that, but the idea is now to change the format and listen to Bruce and find out what this candidate, who did take the time to show up, can tell us about himself, about what he wants for this community, and have him explain to us where he stands on some of the important issues. What I thought we would do, because we are changing the format, is go ahead and allow him to speak, and also live questions from the audience. I think that makes a little bit more sense than trying to write down your questions. But I ask you to please keep your questions short, to the point, and not long statements, because we want to get through everybody's questions as much as possible tonight. I have a couple people I'd like to introduce who are here also. Sam Moore is running for our District 22 state representative position. Carolyn Cosby is the Tea Party leader in Canton, Tea Party Patriots, I assume? Yes. Okay, so it's nice to see you. Anybody else, any elected officials or anyone else? Okay, thank you. At this time then, I would like to go ahead and introduce to you a gentleman who is running for our state senate. He has been through a lot of questions, a lot of different issues over the past few months, and his business experience, family life, religious background, and everything is important to us, as we all know that when we are a public servant, there is no place to hide. So I'm opening the floor up to Bruce, and for him to explain what he's doing here and why he's here, and we will then take some questions from the audience. Thank you. Bruce?
Thank you, Lori. First of all, I just want to say thank you for taking time to come out. It's a little chilly out there. I know that many of you came out because you wanted to see the difference in the two candidates. Clearly, there is a huge differentiation between myself and my opponent. This is an important race. This is not to be taken lightly. And with the challenge right now, with such a short special election and now a runoff, there's going to be some decisions made that maybe we do or do not like. And when I say that, meaning that they're saying the turnout could be less than 3,000 votes. That's a shame, because we have a Senate in the balance. We have a representation of this district of Cherokee County in the balance. That being said, I'd like to start just briefly telling you a little bit about myself, and then get into answering questions that you might have about myself, or maybe about the seat, maybe about my opponent, whatever it might be. So first of all, grew up in Montana on a rural farm, grew up with very little. So like many of you in the room, I had very little. Had to make the best with whatever it was that I was given. Had the opportunity to go to college on a wrestling scholarship. After that, had the opportunity and privilege to serve in the military. That's the first point. Differentiation between myself and my opponent. I did serve in the military. This flag means something to me. Not saying it doesn't mean something that someone doesn't serve, but anyone that served in the military, it's a very special place to us. After the military, I took a job in South Florida. It wasn't too long after that, when I hit 24 years old, I was able to start my first company. That company supplies motorized swimming pool covers throughout the southeast United States. To this day, right now, I still have that company. We have about 6,500 customers. We cover 7 states. Also along the way, I was moving from Florida, and I arrived in Georgia. So in 1990, I became a resident of Georgia. I've started 6 companies, 3 of which are Cherokee County companies. So when people say, this is a Cherokee County seat, we like a Cherokee County candidate, I'm about as close as you can get right now to a Cherokee County candidate. Why is that? My in-laws live in Arbor View, right over here in Cherokee County. My wife came up through First Baptist Woodstock. She was there when there were 400 or 500 people, and of course now it's a major church. We met at First Baptist Woodstock. We used to teach young marrieds at First Baptist Woodstock. We adopted our first daughter when we were at First Baptist Woodstock. Many of you know the Allstate office on Town Lake Parkway. I owned that for a couple of years. 2 software companies that I founded. My business partner lives in Canton. We founded those here as well. So I have direct connections right here to Cherokee County. A lot of friends, a lot of family. It's dear to my heart. Where do I live? I live on Highway 20. I'm kind of a man in no man's land. I'm not quite a Cartersville person. I'm not quite a Cherokee. I live just past Sioux Tally, just about a mile down the road. So I'm as close as you can get to being a Cherokee County resident. So I've started several companies. Along the way, I've had the opportunity to give back. I believe inside, as I've said before, what's in a man or a woman's heart, if you can figure out what their motivation is, you'll see how they'll legislate. You'll see how they make decisions. I've had the privilege along the way of serving as the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in Bartow County. Some people say, well, why is that relevant? The Chamber of Commerce in Bartow County a few years back was in a state of decline. Some challenges there. As a board member, I initiated some changes. Immediately got asked to serve as the chairman of the search team. Went out and hired our CEO. That CEO is Joe Frank Harris Jr. Today's board meeting, we just hit 940 members at that chamber. It was in 650 a year and a half ago. There's $200,000 in the bank in that. We were $50,000 in the red when I took over as chairman. Why do I say that? I can make the decisions we need to. I'm a fiscally responsible individual. That fiscal responsibility reigns true through our campaign. As many of you know, we spent about $35,000 in the very beginning of our campaign. I don't mind sharing, our opponent spent 5 times that. If we would have left the campaign, we would have been at ground zero. In other words, we had enough money in the bank to pay the loan off that I put in there and be back at zero. I think fiscal responsibility are important. That is a core principle as a Republican. I've also had the opportunity in education. That's important to many, many people. Where do I stand on education? I feel like the responsibility of us as parents is to take care of our children. Our responsibility of their education, of their needs and their cares as they grow up. Therefore, I support homeschools, I support charter schools, I support private schools, and I'm a proponent of public education. If you want to send your child to public education, by all means you should have the rights to do that. But if you want to send your child to an alternative, you should have the right to do that as well. And we should adequately fund those as needed. Someone asked how I feel about the education as far as Etowah Scholarship Foundation or the Education Foundation in Bartow County. Education Foundation in Bartow County, Dot Frazier is a huge fan of mine. In fact, she's publicly stated that. What does that foundation do? That foundation provides resources to the teachers in the public education. Because many teachers right now struggle in their classrooms to be able to meet the needs of the students. So this foundation provides some of those resources. So anyone that might think that I am anti-public education, that would not be true. I just believe as a parent, you should have the choice. So at this time, I'd love to open up the questions. I would say this. My wife was not able to join me tonight. I've been happily married for 16 years to Becky. We have 2 children, Faith 13, Max 8. Both of them were newborn adoptions. So when someone asks if I'm pro-life, as I've said publicly before, of course I'm pro-life. My daughter was 10 minutes from being aborted. Her mother was sitting there with termination papers in her hands in Tennessee, trying to make a very difficult decision. God intervened. We were able to bring her from Tennessee to our home, care for her, someone we didn't know before, and I now have a daughter that at 5 years old started playing the piano. We'll play this tomorrow. We'll have a recital that she will play to a grand opening that's happening in Bartow County. So pro-life is not just something I check a box for, it's something I live. That being said, we are proud to be endorsed by Georgia Right to Life.
What I'd like to point out too is that the Cherokee County Republican Party has already vetted on video for all of you to see, and we have vetted Bruce and we have vetted Matt. So if you want to see any of that, it is on the Cherokee County website. What I'd like to do is lead off with a couple questions, and
Sure.
you're probably familiar with all these questions anyhow, and then we can go to audience participation. Describe 3 pieces of legislation that you would like to see passed in your first term as a state Senate candidate.
There are several things that are dear to my heart. One of the biggest pieces is the ethics our state ranks very, very low in ethics in the United States. Depending on who you talk to, we rank between 45th and 50th. That affects so many things, including economic development. Josh McCoon has initiated some legislation down there. I'd love to be able to see that taken further. The first piece of legislation, I believe, that was put forth last year had to do with lobbying gifts. I don't believe it goes far enough. So that's one piece of legislation. I believe we also need to work on some legislation that has to do with children. We need to protect the children within our community. We have predatory acts that happen, and if you look at Kennesaw University just a few years ago, it was one of the #1 places in our state, including the Southeast, where young women were being kidnapped or preyed on. And that piece of legislation needs to be pushed further as well. I also, which might be a little bit ironic, being in the insurance industry, there's some legislation out there right now that has to do with not only texting and driving, but drunken driving and utilization of our phones. I think we need to be careful about going too far, but the reality is we need to reinforce the laws that have to do with DUI and driving when we're intoxicated.
Are there any conditions under which you would advocate either raising existing taxes or implementing new taxes?
I am a fan of less taxes, so let me state that. We have to be very careful about this, but in the times when we are trying to balance our budget, I would not be a fan of taking away something that we didn't replace. So I say that to say that I'm not a fan of just coming up with a new tax. But I can see if we were taking something away and replacing it so that it was balanced and it would not increase the burden that would be on us as taxpayers. I'm certainly not a fan right now of things like the hot lanes. Why am I not a fan of the hot lanes? I feel like if we have already paid for those roads, we need to find a way to be able to increase capacity without taxing the people of Cherokee County.
Can you please describe 3 pieces of legislation you would like to see passed? I just asked you that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's the
I can
cold
rewind
weather.
if you'd like.
It's the cold weather. No, I meant, never mind. What state Senate committees would you like to serve on or lead?
I've already talked to Josh McCoon about this. I would love to be able to serve on some ethics committees. Economic development is dear to my heart. If you look into my background, one of the things that I have a lot of experience in is generating jobs. We have a small little project down in Emerson, Georgia called Lake Point. Lake Point right now is underway. The wakeboard complex is already going. You've probably seen in the media that there's a tower that now is proposed. I'm fortunate that I was able to invest in that and be a part of bringing that to our county. Or to our district, so to speak. And economic development is important. I believe that someone needs the opportunity to work before we worry about any of the other things. Some people will say education comes first. I would say you need to give a person an opportunity to generate income, provide for their family, and then go on to education. So economic development and ethics are both committees that I would love to be able to serve on.
One more question. Based on your understanding of the Georgia Constitution, what do you believe the role of a state senator should be?
Responsibility of a state senator is to make sure that the laws that we have currently in Georgia are not only followed, but we are to make sure that our Constitution is not superseded by our federal Constitution. Here's what I mean by this. We have the federal government right now continuing to impose their will on our state. You elect your legislative people to go down and with their governor and lieutenant governor to protect our state and the laws that we have there. Yes, some of the responsibilities are to pass new legislation to protect the people, but I think personally the overarching responsibility is to make sure that the federal government does not continue to impose their will on us as a state.
Can we take some questions?
Yeah, I have one. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about how you would go about limiting government.
Thank you. One of the things that we need to do is we need to first of all have a zero-based budget. Somebody's trying to find their way.
Sorry, you're apologize.
Can we kind of silence all these electronic things during the meeting? That would be
Absolutely.
great.
I thought it was. I'm
No,
sorry.
you're fine, you're fine.
Okay, I'm just making a suggestion.
So we need to start with a zero-based budget. That's one of our situations that we've had down at the Capitol. They have been working through that with various committees. We need to go completely across the board with zero-based budget. That being said, every time we have a budget put forth, we need to actually look at that budget and make sure that the resources that are going to that budget are not piggybacked with additional things. So in other words, let's streamline everything that's coming in. The resources that we put into something need to go to that. So education, for instance. Our education, we keep hearing saying that we need to fully fund that. What does that mean? Let's take a look at where those resources are going right now and how they're being utilized. There's a lot of waste that's happening. I've been told by someone down at the Capitol there is $60 million sitting in a reserve account for education right now. How many of us knew about that? Okay. Why is that sitting in a reserve right now? Why is that not unlocked where we can be able to do some things? So your question is, how would we do that? We need to be fully transparent on everything that's taking place at the Capitol. I have run on a campaign where the platform has said transparency. Transparency needs to reign true not only at the Capitol, but it needs to reign true with each of the candidates.
As a follow-up to that, I've been told the transportation department is floating in money. And that's another area where I think we need to take a hard look at what's being spent.
Yes, ma'am. I would agree with that. Transportation right now, as we have economic development, you've heard recently that Georgia is now being ranked as either number one or in the top 3 as places to do business, business-friendly in the United States. That's great news to us. Along with opportunity comes challenges, because we're going to have some transportation challenges. We already have transportation challenges. So we need to look at that DOT and say, all right, guys, where's this money going, and why is it not reaching what it was intended for? I, too, have heard the same thing, that there is a surplus of money down there that's not being utilized where it's supposed to. Goes back to transparency. Yes, sir.
State your name, please.
My name is Mark Dabney. I'm a resident of Cherokee County, around New Harley, around Plant Bowen. There's a lot that weighs on my mind. I'll try and be concise. Comprehensive annual financial reports show that we have a system that has salted away massive amounts of money across the board that are hidden in plain sight. Meaning, if you know how to look for it, there it is. Now, one of the major things that concerns me, this fiat Ponzi scheme, we, the people, never agreed to a debt-based, actually it's fraudulent, it's where money is borrowed, put into being, that did not exist before. We did not agree to a system that we pay tax, this income tax is entirely devoured by paying interest to a gang of criminals that at every turn have lied to us. They have refused to acknowledge what they're doing with the system, and this Ponzi scheme is going to collapse. We don't know when, but we do know that it is going to collapse.
Sir, do you have a question?
And the question I'm asking is, what are we going to do to the accountability needs to be reinstated, that these plutocrats have done a lot of evil things. They have changed our Constitution fraudulently. They have enslaved us into debt that is mathematically impossible to pay back. What are we going to do to reinstate the organic Constitution and the lawful government the founders intended, instead of the system that we have now that is more and more of exactly what the founders warned us against?
Thank you.
If I could follow up on that.
I'm still trying to digest
Let's just
that.
take one let's just take one question at a time.
Would you be in favor of repealing the direct election of senators and going back to the state legislatures electing senators?
Okay.
Amendment 17?
The 17th Amendment
Yes.
was ratified.
Yes. If I can, I'd love to address, I'd like to address this.
One question at a time,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, sir.
Please.
Yeah, I believe the easiest way to do this, because a lot of what you're talking about is on the federal level, but the easiest way to do that is get educated as voters and get out and vote. That is the one thing you can do. Vote people out of office that do not stand on the same principles that you do, that said one thing when they were running for office, and then once they wound up in office, did something completely different. That's one thing you can do. In addition to that, being involved in the process. So when I say being involved in the process, our taxes right now, in my opinion, are out of balance. If we went to some fair tax or flat tax or something along the way, I think that would be some kind of a resolution that we could put in place that maybe address what he's talking about with runaway. But on the federal level, you're really talking about something our congressional people should be working on.
Okay, yeah, you want to ask that question again so that?
Yes, so would you be in favor of repealing the direct election of senators so that we could revert to each state legislative body appointing the senators from each
Yes.
state? And would you try to bring any pressure to bear on any of our federal representatives in order to get that done or get that moving? Or what would you actually apply yourself to it?
Sure, I would have no problem with bringing whatever pressure that we have. As a freshman, you're coming in, you've got to be cognizant of the fact that you're not going to have a whole lot of influence when it comes to that. But when the opportunity presents itself, by all means, I think we need to be able to go back to that. That's one of the ways to address what his concern is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jack?
Jack Staver, I got a question. If we enacted a legislation for state sovereignty, which would eradicate a lot of Fed stuff, would you support a bill like that?
It would be challenging for me, Jack, to just say unequivocally yes, but it certainly sounds appealing to me. But without actually seeing what all that means, because I know there's a cause and effect, but absolutely, I would love to see our state be able to go back to governing itself instead of being tied to so many things that are on a federal level. But I'm not sure exactly what that
There
bill
will be legislation again this year. It was introduced last year and got.
I'd be happy to look at that.
Okay, Nancy?
All right, it's tied to the federal level because of money. We can all agree to that.
Yes, ma'am.
They're pumping money into our state and doing things that we, the people, have little to no control about with. What is your position on Common Core? And if you are against it, what would you do to remove its control from our Georgia educational system?
Yeah, I figured you were going to Common Core. You are correct. Common Core is probably the largest unfunded mandate that we're put on our state. One of the challenges, and I'll get to answer your question, with something like Common Core is that once it's instituted into our state, there's so many strings attached to it. Do we really think the federal government's going to continue to fund it? It's going to wind up in our hands, and it's going to be one other thing for us to be able to have to fund. I think as far as Common Core, we need to stop it. Now, I realize the governors have gotten together, the governor's board, and that's what put it in there. I'm not sure exactly how we'd be able to do that, but I certainly know that if we were as a group at the Senate level and the House and get together, we might be able to somehow repeal whatever the actions are being taken on that. We do need to take action on it pretty quick because it's moving fairly quick down the pipeline, and once the schools start relying on it, the education starts relying on it, then we're going to be handcuffed to it.
Next question? John?
Yeah, on a local level, we've been stung by multiple projects from golf courses to recycling plants, stuff can go on and on, based on what I would call not fiscally sound best practices in finance. So I just want to get you feel it's not here, but there's a stadium being built, as you probably read in the paper. And I'm a finance guy. What makes no sense to me is that it's on a 30-year bond and it's a 20-year project. Now, I'm a banker. We would never approve a 30-year bond on a 20-year project. So I'm just trying to get your logic as to would you support, if you were our guy, if some sort of project came, would you support us getting a 30-year bond on something with a 20-year life cycle?
Well, first of all, Dan, again, I'm going to back up before I answer this question. If we're elected to represent you, the people. If the people wanted to support it, then yes. If the people did not want to support it, then why would I take that stance? One of our challenges we have as legislative people is we seem to go down and make decisions without checking with the people. But to answer your question, it doesn't make sense to me why that happened. I actually sat with someone today, I won't use his name, but it has something to do with the Braves organization and asked the same question. Not only from a funding standpoint, but what about a traffic standpoint? So there's a lot bigger challenge to that other than just funding the stadium too.
Follow up to what he says, not only do we not want to see things funded or financed way beyond their life expectancy, but what about technologies like computers and that kind of equipment, financing that for 30 years?
Yeah, I think
That's what's
we
going on
amortize
in
those out over,
schools
what,
right
2
now.
years, or expense them?
Yeah.
So it
Well,
doesn't
not
make a lot of
necess-
sense.
The problem is, what this lovely lady is talking about is that a lot of the parts, that there's lack of controls of what's inside the bonding bills, and a lot of the items that are put inside the bonding bills would not make, I mean, the reason why us suckers are financing it is because no real bank would finance it, because no
Correct.
idiot would finance something that goes beyond its life cycle. Not to be rude,
Sure,
but
no, you're not being
and then the second part that's even more important is if I'm the Braves, think about it this way. In 20 years, I need an upgrade. So let's say someone comes in here to do a project like that. Well, the reason why you wouldn't also do it as a finance person is because I have all the leverage. Because if you don't give me anything I want, you're panicked because you got 10 more years to pay. You get the
Oh,
problem.
I understand.
So if you ever, to my friend over there's point, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but my friend's point.
Carolyn.
Carolyn, I apologize, Carolyn, but Carolyn's absolutely correct, because it doesn't matter if it's computers or whatever, whoever is the person, you've now given the opposite leverage, which seems to happen in numerous projects across our county. Forget the federal government, we have this happening every day here, right in Cherokee
If I
County.
can, that's a Cobb County situation, I use that, but let's be more specific to Cherokee County. You got the boondoggle with the recycling, correct?
Yes.
Why did that happen? That happened because you didn't have transparency, and you had things going on behind the scenes. Yes? So when we talk about transparency, again, it starts with the candidates. If you don't start with ingredients good here, what do you expect when you're gonna get down at the assembly?
Sir? Yes, question.
Okay, my question, though, is it seems to me, and I've been, ever since I was young, my dad had to get involved in the political process
Yes, sir.
and going to meet the candidates. But how come it seems that we go to see the candidate as, you know, but yet they seem to, well, they'll listen to us or have the personal, but then they don't seem to act the way that it's apparently, based on public opinion after the fact, that they didn't do what we were asking them to do. And I mean, you can't do everything everybody asks you to do, I understand. But it just feels like these candidates, they get in there and they just keep getting elected. But it's like, our interests don't matter. The big interests are the ones that seem to matter because they throw all this campaign money at it. How do we correct that? You know, I mean,
How do we hold their feet to the fire? in other words?
Yeah, well, by the way, regarding the thing about the get involved in the process, Karen Handel ran against those touchscreen voting machines that are complete fraud. And I didn't mean to be verbose when I asked her about those a while back, but I asked her in meticulous detail, these things are known to be hackable, they have been hacked, and get involved in the political process. that
Sir, I have a question on the
Okay, I'm
floor.
sorry.
You're welcome to ask
Yeah,
another
all
one
right,
in a few
all right,
minutes, but we
all
have
right.
a question on the floor.
All right.
Bruce, would you like to answer that gentleman's question?
Can you restate exactly what the question
How
is?
do you campaign promises going forward?
Well, again, I keep hammering this, but it starts with your candidates. If you know the heart and motive of somebody of why they want to go serve, think about this seat for a second. This Senate seat pays $17,000. That's what it pays. Well, that's what it should pay, anyway. It may grow into more, okay, if someone's got deals going on, but in a clear conscience, transparent transaction, it pays $17,000.
right.
Why would my opponent want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for a $17,000 seat?
Well, it makes no economic sense.
Thank you.
Just like Brewster's Millions, right.
But
So it starts with your candidate. If you've got a candidate, a man or a woman that has a heart to serve, and they understand the job at hand is to represent you, the people, then you will stay connected. You will have forums. Some of the individuals that came out and endorsed me this week from Cherokee County, a Michael Caldwell or a Scott Turner, they're very accessible.
right.
That's what you do. You make yourself accessible. So you make yourself accessible, and then the people hold them accountable. The next step is you vote them out of office. The problem we have, ladies and gentlemen, is voter apathy. My goodness, we had 7,200 people vote in my first round. I was fortunate enough to win 34%. Why do we have only 7,100, 7,200 people? It's voter apathy. That should be 20-some thousand people turn out and say, enough. Get your friends, your family, and everyone out and vote. Not only in this one, but the next time an election comes up. If they can't hold them their feet to the fire, you can't do it by just talking. Vote them out of office.
Dean? I'm gonna go around.
Sorry, I'm a little passionate about this.
Yeah, Dean Sheridan, how you doing?
Hey, Dean.
I had a couple questions. Thank you for showing up tonight, Bruce.
It's my pleasure.
I had a couple questions, and I'm going to context this in the realm of this is a special election.
Yes, sir.
So, and you and I have spoke candidly about conservative idealism. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
So my first question would be, how do you contrast that from your opponent? Where do you excel in that area based on our conversations or what you believe, number one, because he's not here. Number two, why do you believe he didn't show up tonight? And number three, someone needs to explain to me the confusion that's going on between if you didn't vote in the original election and now we're in the runoff, can someone that didn't vote, can they vote in the special election? So those are my three questions.
Thank you, Dean.
Try to stick to one question apiece. Go fast.
The first question that the Dean asked was, let's differentiate between myself and my opponent as far as fiscal responsibility. Is that correct? All right. We can actually go to the disclosure statements, which is public, and you can see that. My opponent, on his disclosure, now I assume that that's true because that's what they disclosed, loaned their campaign over $100,000 of his own money. It's pretty quiet in here. Then they exceeded that and spent that in the first go-round. So had he not made it to the runoff and had he lost, he would have owed himself or someone a great sum of money. We stuck to our plan. Our plan was raise around $40,000. I seeded it like any candidate would with $10,000. We raised the other 30 from people like you and you and you within the district. He raised less than $3,000 from your district. That's fiscal responsibility. If I walked away today, we would have paid my $10,000 back and we'd have been back to ground zero. If you can't run your campaign fiscally responsible, and it's your own money, how are you going to deal with the people's money? In this runoff right now, I don't know exactly, we'll see in the disclosure, but I'm told that there's a greater sum of money than the first time being spent on his campaign. We again have decided to stick to $30,000 to $40,000. What comes in, we will actually go out. If I'm not chosen to be your state senator because I'm not willing to spend a couple $100,000 on this campaign, so be it. I think it's important as one-on-one that you get a chance to see what my values are, why I'm here. In addition to that, I'd be more than happy to say publicly, I'm 48 years old. I grew up with nothing. I learned that we were poor because when I was 12, a girl at a Sadie Hawkins dance said to me, you know your pants are supposed to touch your shoes. You know, that's when you go like, okay? So fiscal responsibility, I know what the consequence of not being fiscal responsible. Matt, bless his heart, grew up with a family that had money. He's 2 years out of college. Somebody help me understand how someone 2 years out of college would know really how to build